Hello, friends. My name is Liam, and so I'm a native English speaker from the United States, and I have spent a lot of time studying languages. I have studied Spanish. I speak it pretty well. I speak some French. I speak Portuguese. I speak a little bit of German, a tiny bit of Italian. I've studied indigenous languages, so an indigenous language from Mexico, an indigenous language from Paraguay. I've studied Greek and Latin. So, depending on your definition, I would qualify as a polyglot. I tend to prefer the term multilingual. I think, the term polyglot feels very specific and feels very prestigious, but it's a little vague if you actually go into it. And a lot of people, can just kind of call themselves a polyglot. So I prefer multilingual because it's a little more honest. It's directly kind of vague. Anyone who speaks more than one language, or likes languages in general can say, oh, they're multilingual. So you can think of this as how being multilingual has changed my relationship to English, my native language. And I'm sorry if you feel like a little bit clickbaited by that, but without further ado. So first, after studying other languages, especially other languages that are related to English, I feel a lot more aware of etymology. If you study German, you're gonna see like a lot of our base words, are pretty similar. So the word for book in German is Buch, das Buch. You go, oh, Buch, book. They're pretty similar. Tooth sign. You can like learn some sound changes. You can even go back and you can like learn like sound changes with like Indo-European and how like father, vater, padre, how they're all related, if you want to. And also, if you learn like a Romance language or Latin, you're going to be super aware of etymology, because the French invaded England in 1066, and the rich people spoke French, and so a lot of our words come from French. You also be really aware of like what kinds of words those are, because they were the rich, educated people. The French words tend to have more sophisticated register. They tend to sound fancier, really. And a good example of this is like a pretty famous thing, I think. Cow is a Germanic root because the poor farmers who raised the cows, who interacted with the cows as animals, spoke a Germanic language, spoke like Old English or Middle English, depending on the exact period. And then the rich people who ate cow, who interacted with cow as a food and not as an animal, called it beef. Comes from boeuf in French, so it's a related word. So we can see kind of there's an interesting class distinction there. So a lot of times they'll have the same word with a Germanic root, and another time it'll be a French root. It'll sound fancier. Sometimes they'll be more hostile, and sometimes we'll get a third root in there from Latin or Greek, and that's really fun. And so the example I love of this is, I forget who came up with this. I think the first place I heard about this was John McWhorter, but it's something you become aware of. So we have the word ask. It's a nice Germanic root. You go, okay, ask. You ask someone a question. He asked me about this. And then we have question. And question sounds a little fancier, but also like more hostile. Like, he questioned me? Like, he sounds kind of suspicious. Like, what's going on there? And then we have the Latin root, which is like the third level. It's like the highest one, and it's interrogate. So he interrogated me, and that sounds like I've just been like taken in the middle of the night, and I have like my arms tied behind my back, and they're like torturing me. So we have ask, normal, question, kind of hostile, a little more fancy. Interrogate, like more fancy. I wouldn't like be talking to a small child and expect them to know what the word interrogate means. But also like way more hostile. I think that's a really interesting thing. Or like another place where this comes up, is we have ER words. Like this is better when we're making a comparison. So like bigger. So this book is bigger than this book. We don't say more big. We say bigger. But then with the non-Germanic roots, with the words that come from other languages, we don't use we don't say, oh, this dress is more eleganter, or this dress is eleganter than that dress. We say, oh, this dress is more elegant. And so a lot of times that, whether we use the ER ending or whether we use the word more, really has to do with where the word came from. And so that's just like a weird thing you kind of get aware of, especially with like spelling. So a lot of times we'll have like a TH that's pronounced like a T, or like a PH pronounced like an F, or like a Y used as a vowel in some weird way. And a lot of times those are Greek words, And if you study Greek, like, it just becomes super obvious and becomes super intuitive. Whereas before, it just kind of felt like, oh, English spelling doesn't make any sense. That's just how it is. If you like go into a lot of the history of it, English spelling does tend to be a lot more etymological. Sometimes it's just random. Sometimes it's a little bit made up. A great example of this is we have the word island has an S in there. So one might reasonably assume at one point we pronounced the S in island. So it would be like Island or something like that. And then we just stopped pronouncing the S. And what happened was is it was never pronounced. There was never an S. But some scholar was like, the Latin word for island is insula. And insula kind of sounds like island, and insula has an S. So we're gonna put an S in island, and everyone just kind of went with it, And so now we have an S in island. This also happened with debit and debt. We added in a B for Latin reasons, for etymological reasons, and then we started pronouncing it again in the case of debit. Another kind of related thing to this of just like more vocabulary awareness is you get used to like words that sound really obscure in English, really elegant, but are also just kind of normal. Or at least I did. This happened to me. So a great example of this is in Spanish is the word cotidiano. It means it happens every day. It's related to an English word quotidian. Now, cotidiano in Spanish, it's a completely normal word. Quotidian does not sound like a normal word to me in English. I might have read it at some point. Probably most people, if they came across this word in their daily life, if they were reading something, they'd have to look it up or tell by context or just kind of ignore it. I wouldn't, expect like a child to know this word, certainly. But it's just a completely normal word in Spanish. And there are other examples of this. If something that sounds really fancy in one language, it's just or in English, it's just like very normal in another language. So in Spanish, like the word for second to last is penúltimo. And then in English, we have the word penultimate. But it's not a super commonly used word. It's something I've heard, like some like particularly nerdy people who do like a podcast might say penultimate. But it's not necessarily a word I would expect everyone to know. Certainly not, again, like if I was talking to a child, I wouldn't think, oh, if I use this word penultimate, they're going to know what I'm talking about. Point number 2 is just better awareness of grammar. I feel like this is probably one of the less shocking things is when you learn another language, you have to learn about grammar. And so if you didn't know a lot about grammar before, you're gonna know more about grammar after learning another language. You just kind of have to. You have to, especially if you really don't know anything. Like if you don't know what a verb is, an adjective, or a noun, you have to learn that. It's just like basic stuff that you don't need to speak your native language, but you do need when you're learning another language. But after that, you get into like more obscure things. Like a lot of times you have to learn what a transitive or intransitive verb is, or a subordinate clause, and all of these kinds of things. And there are a lot of people, and I was one of them, I didn't know a lot about grammar until I started studying other languages. But then you study another language and you learn about grammar, and you learn about it in the context of another language, and you can apply it again to English to know about moods and aspect and transitivity and all of these things that sound really hard and complicated but become intuitive after just a little bit of study and learning about it in a more intellectualized context of another language. So next up, this is kind of the opposite. It's probably the reason you clicked on this video. I read slower now, and sometimes I feel a little bit less fluent in English, actually. And so these are related, but two slightly different things. So reading slower is just, I got super used to reading in other languages where there'll be a mountain of words that I have to look up, or else I won't be able to follow, I won't learn anything, it won't be a good time. I like looking up words, I like learning. It's one of the reasons I like to learn in another language. And so I started doing this a lot. And once you get used to like looking up, 3 words per paragraph or whatever, once you're happy looking up only 1 word per page, and then you go back and you're reading like a book in your native language, in my case English, and you find a word you don't know, it doesn't happen a lot. I mean, it depends on the book. It might happen a fair amount in some books, especially if it's older books written from another country, whatever. But yeah, it's a lot easier to, think, oh, I should look this up. Whereas before, honestly, I I either just kind of guessed by context. There were a lot of words where I felt kind of like I knew what they mean, but I wouldn't bother looking them up, or I just kind of ignore it. It's like, okay, I don't know what that sentence means. It's probably not an important sentence. A lot of times, it's just like a descriptive thing. But now I really like looking up new words. I like learning about it. I like taking my time. I like taking my time more in reading in general. Just I got used to thinking this is kind of a slower process and just kind of chewing with everything. So I think although I'm a slower reader now, I would say I'm a better reader. I hear a lot of people talking about speed reading. And at this point, now that I've kind of slowed down, I've been kind of like forced into it by reading in other languages. Often going back to read the same thing like twice or three times, make sure I really get it, to appreciate the beauty or the meaning, and really kind of think about it. I don't really see the appeal of speed reading. Like, obviously, I'd love to be able to consume information super quickly, but in terms of reading as an enjoyable process, I like taking it slowly. And as I mentioned, I do feel a little bit less fluent in English sometimes. So there'll be moments when I'll be able to think of the word in another language, but not in English, or I have accidentally talked to another person in the wrong language, which is a little embarrassing because it's hard to explain. It's like, I'm sorry, I spoke to you like in French. I meant English, but then my brain didn't do that. And then they're like, what are you talking about? It's not a thing that happens to people. It's like, it is. I swear to God, it's a thing that happens because I was looking down at my phone and I saw a notification in French, and then my brain switched to French in the middle of the sentence. Like, what? No. But yeah, it's something that happens to me. I think it happens to some other people. And I think a lot of the time it depends on if I'm really kind of going hard and studying a new language, or I'm trying to kind of build up a new language, one that I'm not so great in. But once I get to like a higher level and I can kind of rest, it's not that hard. So if I started learning like a new language, like Japanese, I might have this problem. But if I've just been practicing Spanish all day, it's one of my stronger languages, I can kind of switch back more confidently, and honestly, it's not even like switching to English. It's not like it's hard to start English. It's hard to, get the Spanish to stop, or the Japanese, if I were to start learning Japanese. I will also occasionally use a phrase or a word incorrectly, or something that is incorrect will sound like normal to me just because that's how it's used in another language. And so the example I always think of this is I was writing an essay for college, and I used the word potency to mean strength. Because I was thinking that's just what the word means. What are you talking about? It's like power, poder, potencia, like this, like it's strength. And like, no, Liam, like, potency, you just use that for like drugs, like a potent drug. But I'm like, oh, he was a potent king or something, and it makes it sound like, you need to take a low dosage of him or something, or else, you're gonna get, you're gonna start tripping on the king. So the fourth thing is actually something that's happened kind of more recently, but with Spanish, one of the things that I love about it, it is a super diverse language. It's spoken in a ton of countries. It's spoken in Spain, in Mexico, Argentina, like half of South America, most of Central America, a tiny country in Africa. And so I'd look out of my way. I'd go out of my way to kind of look for things to do in Spanish from a variety of countries, expose myself to different accents, learn different slang, learn about new cultures. I really kind of embraced that. And recently I was just thinking, I don't do the same thing in English. Like, English is a global language, not just as a second language. There are a lot of places where people speak a lot of English. So we have the US, a large portion of Canada, the UK, Ireland, New Zealand, Australia, Belize, Jamaica, the Bahamas. A lot of people in India speak English. There are a lot of places where they speak English. Even in Africa, there's a lot of African literatures in English, and I just like haven't read that. I read like Things Fell Apart by Chinua Achebe, but I'm thinking, wow, I really should like embrace that more. I should start reading more like African literature written in English or Caribbean literature. I should go out and try and learn about more cultures that don't exist in my native language. Like, how cool is that? We speak a language. Might not be your native language, but if you're watching this, hopefully you speak English. But we speak a language it's spoken in so many places that's so diverse, and you can go out and you can learn about all of those things. You don't have to just like stick with American and British media. And I think that's really beautiful. Also, in terms of time, I was reading a book recently written in the 30s, and I just like really loved going over and finding like all the old timey like hobo slang. It's like, oh wow, this is really cool. It's really interesting. Especially it was written like phonetically, so there's a lot of things like instead of writing pretty, it's like purdy. It's like, oh wow, like I had like this really big connection, or this really is a cool thing. I don't think I would have fully appreciated before, and so I'm glad I now have that appreciation of the diversity within the English language. And so the fifth thing is a little bit harder to articulate. It's more about an understanding that English is a bubble. And we like to think that, well, English is the global language. Everyone can speak English. That's not true. Not everyone can speak English. So if you go out and you learn another language, Spanish, French, Chinese, well, whatever language it might be, you're going to come across some people who don't speak English. And you're going to be able to form friendships that you couldn't form before, and cultural understanding. And you're going to be able to listen to music that doesn't exist in English. I mean, you can listen to that music now, but like understanding it is different. And you start to see that not all of the media that you might like exists in whatever happens to be your native language. This Galatian poet who I really like, who wrote Folias Novas. So it's like New Pages, I think it's translated into. I don't remember the name of the book in English, but it was only recently translated, like within my lifetime, into English, and just wasn't available. Or there are things I've read like in the indigenous language of Mexico that like I don't think have ever been translated into English, and I think that's just a really cool thing. And you're kind of like closed off to a large portion of the world. There are 7,000 languages. You can't learn them all. But it's an awareness that not everything exists in English. And just have to kind of accept that, and you can find new things. You can go out and learn more about the world. But I think there really is just kind of a limit there. You won't be able to know all of the greatest books as they were originally written. And you'll see, things really aren't quite the same in translation. And you just kind of have to be aware of that and accept it. It's just one of the weird unforeseen consequences of learning some other languages. And so yeah, I've recently started making videos in English again. And I'm going to be talking about books and poetry and language and all of the wonderful things that I love. So if you thought this was a cool video, drop me a like. And thank you so much.